All right, hello and welcome everyone to another builds refresh, this time for Octavia, taking a bit of an extended break from the persistence build videos. We have some new stuff to talk about on Octavia, as there are a few new tools and options for her in recent memory that we should discuss. That being mainly the subsume that we're going to be using today, which is of course Noko's Bright Bonnet, which is phenomenal here. Gives you a perfect energy economy alongside some meaningful buffs, because Octavia does care quite a bit about strength, and is just a great subsume overall. I am not fully convinced that this is just the de facto best thing to be using. There are still definitely considerations for running Pillage or Nourish or any number of other good subsumes that you are allowed to run, because unfortunately Amp does overlap with things like Roar and Eclipse and the like, though Eclipse you probably would never run over Roar, even if you could, in this second slot, just due to the way Octavia survives. But yeah, we have a bunch of shards here that we're going to address first, and it's pretty easy to address. This is 5 Tau ability duration shards, and these are all very, very nice for significantly lowering the amount of babysitting, for lack of a better term, that you have to do to all of the timers that are in Octavia's kit. Every single one of these abilities is just a timer that you want to be as long as possible, so it needs as little maintenance from you as you can possibly get away with, while you do objectives and do whatever else you need to be doing in a given mission. So that's why we are on a ton of these duration shards. Luckily, you don't need any of them, because you're going to lose 75% duration and still be at a totally acceptable 155 duration. That'll just require more upkeep on your part. That is notably a thing that a lot of people don't like about Octavia, and I get it. So that's not for you. Maybe you'll want 5 Tau shards to be in her build. For that, the build itself has not super changed. There's some things to talk about and some other options that you can put on this build that I do want to discuss. But for the most part, things are pretty cut and dry here. We're on a ton of duration, but in this case, of course, the shards are making up most of that, and Prime Continuity is making up the rest, so we don't have to take any downsides. We're on a ton of strength, because pretty much everything that she does benefits from strength. The Mallet multiplier is quite important. All of the buffs you're going to get from Metronome get better. And of course, Amp's big damage multiplier also gets significantly improved. Not to mention Bright Bonnet scaling with strength to give you more energy, more strength, and like. So tons and tons of strength, tons and tons of duration. And of course, that comes alongside tons and tons of range. Now, a big thing that is worth noting that you can totally swap in and out of this build is overextended. This is a lot of range, a massive amount of range. You have a very large one, and that radius is doubled by Amp. So when you're doing what you should be doing, which is putting Amp down and putting Mallet down, that is going to be a 50-meter radius on Mallet, which is significantly overkill for the vast majority of tile sets, but that overkill is definitely nice and will come up, especially if you are going to be, bringing Octavia to open world content or any kind of much larger, more open tile set. If you're going to be bringing her into Duviri, many places will come up where that extra range is going to be quite appreciated, but you don't have to always run overextended, and that's going to give you 60% more ability strength, which is quite nice. Speaking of ability strength, the Arcanes that are on this build run Molt Augmented, which is 60% once it's built up, and Arcane Crepuscular, because we're invisible the vast majority of the time, for another 30%. That 3x final critical damage multiplier is not a huge deal on Octavia, but if you are going to be shooting enemies with your guns at all, is a significant damage bonus that you are going to be receiving. And of course, her just damage buffing capabilities through Amp for a large Serration style modifier, plus a large crit damage modifier, is going to mean you are going to be hitting enemies for quite a big chunk of damage as long as you are critting. With that, in these slots, Molt Augmented, you do not need to run this. And if you do not have the shards that I have, I would actually, instead of this, suggest a new Arcane, which is Arcane Concentration. The extra 60% ability duration on here is quite nice, and especially with Noko's Bright Bonnet, I have actually found that it is not a problem at all. You just throw Bright Bonnet whenever you need this to turn on, and then usually refresh your 3, refresh your 4, and of course, refresh your 1. So you have that additional 60% duration on all of those abilities, and that's going to be pretty equivalent to just having the full set of shards. Of course, on the back end, you're not going to have Molt Augmented built up, and you're going to lose 60% ability strength overall. But your 1 generally does a pretty good job of scaling itself, and the strength is more of an added bonus once you get up to a high enough amount. And even without Molt Augmented here, we're going to be at almost 300%, which should be plenty, especially if you are also dropping overextended for any number of other things. Speaking of dropping overextended for other things, one of the primary things that you can drop overextended 4 is, of course, going to be if you need that extra strength for whatever reason. Transient Fortitude is a very reasonable option. Obviously, this comes with the pretty significant cost of losing some duration on the back end, but that is quite nice. Also, though, if you are lacking in the duration department, you don't mind cutting some range, dropping Overextended just for the last of our suite of Augur mods is not a bad option either. It's only 24% additional ability duration, but that's like not a problem at all, and it'll fit on the same amount of Forma, of course, here with the additional capacity that we do have at our fingertips. So that is always nice to be able to get some more of this and just like swap things around just kind of as necessary if it's going to be appropriate for this defense mission or whatever you happen to be jumping into. But generally, I just leave her on Overextended, and that's more than fine. Other thing that is worth noting, we're on almost max range. The reason for that is that really the 15% power strength is like probably the best thing you could have up here. The Cunning Drift is just way, way overkill. If you're going into specifically open world in a gigantic area that you know you're going to want to cover with her one, I guess you could run Cunning Drift. But really, this Exila slot can totally be left empty, which means it actually saves you quite a bit of Forma with this 14 additional capacity that we have here. The Exila slot is not adding a whole lot, as you don't have a really big need for something like PSF, as most of the time you're not going to be getting knocked down, though, of course, you can feel free to toss that in there also, if you want to make sure that no errant, Eximus flame waves or anything like that ever knock you off your feet and catch you unawares. So that's all well and good. Weapon-wise, nothing particularly matters here. She's good with kind of any weapon that is good. I'm using the basis just entirely for theme. In terms of companion, I usually just take a pet that doubles loot. In this case, that is like the Chesakubro, which is just, just fine. It gives you retrieve, which is even more loot stuff. Usually what you're doing with Octavia is going to be quite passive. Now, there are two things that I want to talk about that Octavia says she does, but she doesn't really do. And that is specifically to call out that I think that Mallet and Amp are bugged and have been bugged for quite a long time. And this is just a good opportunity to talk about it. And that is to say that Mallet specifically states in its ability description that rhythmically beats damage into nearby enemies and draws their fire. Mallet doesn't really do that second part of drawing their fire. It can be the target of enemies' bullets. It is allowed to be, but it doesn't really pull aggro off of your teammates, more specifically because you're going to be invisible. And that can make this, I think, currently a somewhat frustrating ability to use in a team setting, and you're usually going to be better off solo, which is a bit unfortunate, but that is kind of the current way that Mallet is working out. So that might just be bugged. I'm hoping that that is the case, as I, feel like in the past it has specifically forced enemies to shoot at it whenever they are getting hit by it and are in the radius of it. But it is not really performing as that, especially whenever I've been messing with this in just random pub squads and stuff. A lot of enemy attention has been very weird with it. The other thing is that Amp, and I believe this has been the case for maybe ever, Amp does double the range of your one, but this is also supposed to double the damage of your one, but it doesn't do that. I don't think it's ever done that, but I just wanted to call out that it says it does that, and I'm pretty sure it never has done that. So I mean, at the very least, it probably should be removed from the ability description if it's not going to do that. So with that, we have to talk about the very, very important part, and that is the Mandachord. Now, I am going to show you a Mandachord. It is not a song, really, but it is kind of what you might want to go for purely functionality reasons. Any song that you like or whatever that is like similar to this in terms of structure should be good. But what we have here is a washing machine. I have recently edited this just a little bit, and the basic gist of this, although I will save you all by turning the volume off now, is you want Metronome, which is your third ability, to be basically full stack. You want like a beat on every single hit here, and this is so you can just mash hold to crouch and just get invisibility very, very easily. So you want every single note to be filled in one way, shape, or form down here. Every other like this is just fine and very consistent. We're just mashing Alt, in my case, for crouching and making sure that I am invisible. It's also good for hitting all of the other buffs because it's pretty much impossible to miss time realistically if you were just mashing whatever button is associated with it, which is nice. Resonator does not matter at all. Just run whatever because we have Resonator subsumed. It's not here, so we don't need to worry about it. In terms of Mallet, though, I've done a bunch of testing on this, and it used to be that the structure of each kind of section here, like I do these in like sections of 4, it used to look like this. This is like what it used to look like, where you would just get constant beats and like get damage out that way. My testing for her this go around, every 4, or like with like 3 spaces in between, so I guess every 4 is how you would word that, has really worked out better. It actually has increased my like general KPM in my testing by about 10 to 20 by spacing it like this instead. So that is a pretty significant bump, because this like could very easily just kind of passively do like 110 KPM. And with this, I have been able to see numbers that are like closer to 150 KPM pretty regularly, even on some tiles that would normally be pretty suboptimal for this setup. So I do think that instead of going like full on for what your Mallet setup is, going more spaced out, just like chunky hits, has actually worked out a bit better for me. I don't know if anything, there's a hotfix or a change or something that I missed somewhere that's causing that, but it has been better this way. So it's just at least trying that out if you're used to using Octavia with some specific song that is like more note heavy in the Mallet area, maybe giving spaced out notes a chance to see if you like it better. But yeah, in terms of this, that is what's going on. That's like kind of the basic functionality of what you need to know. You can make it work with pretty much whatever, and of course choosing a song you like is going to be ideal, unless you're just going to always have it muted, which is definitely an option. Then you can listen to your own music. For this, in terms of the test and whatnot, usually you want to throw your 2 first. Throw your 2 out to get power strength. That's all well and good. Throw down your 3. Go invisible by just crouching a bunch. And then throw out your 1. Throw out your 4. And that is going to intake damage from the enemies and then output that damage back to the enemies. Now, the thing that you'll note here is it's not drawing the enemies in. They're drawn to like my last known location. That's another one of the weird things I've seen here. If you just shoot, it kind of makes the enemies not aware of your last known position anymore, and then they'll attack the other available target. Kind of some more weird stuff I have noticed with Mallet. And then Mallet will just hang out. It'll build damage into it. It will lower its damage over time. You can see those big chunky hits just like removing these enemies from the equation here. You can see it not drawing those enemies' fire as I became visible and was immediately shot, which is not too big a deal. This is why we have the auger mods in the build, so I can just turn my shields back on. But that is kind of what's up. You want your Mallet out, and this will just saturate a very large area with very large amounts of damage, and take a bunch of damage into it, killing all of the enemies in the process. It's pretty good for that. Alongside that, it is worth noting your 3 gives, I mean, just a Korean MMO worth of buffs. There is just an absolute ton that is in here. It gives you a base armor increase, which is very, very funny. It gives you speed, multi-shot, melee damage, invisibility, of course. Like, it is just a ton of buffs that are in here. Primarily, though, the other thing that I do want to call out is that multi-shot is a pretty significant number, all things considered. So getting that plus the amp damage is going to be quite massive. Plus, of course, the critical damage while we're invisible from our Arcane. It is a ton of damage buffing. And pretty much, like, if you're an Acolyte shows up, or if you have anything going on, especially with something like the Coded Base Assist, just blow them away. Just like one shot, just dump a couple million damage into their forehead, and they will really not like that. But that's pretty much the overall game plan with Octavia. Let's jump into Tav and check it out. Don't you worry, everyone. I've got your back. We're not going to do that. We're going to just turn off my personal Mandachord volume. I will not make you listen to the washing machine for the foreseeable future. But it is very interesting that I think that the slightly different patterning has worked out so much better. Although I'm gonna say that and have done, like, you know, a bunch of tests here about like which beat pattern has been better, and then this one's going to be just like back down to like 100 kpm, and it's going to be like a weird outlier in what I've tested, and that's just the way it is sometimes. But yeah, really nice that like these just work. Just getting the mushrooms immediately, just toss these down. Initially, you just fill up on energy, and then just like making sure that you have these available throughout the rest of the mission is just going to give you such a huge income of energy. Right here, we can just toss down all of our stuff and our business, go invisible. You can see just the pumping damage here. I will note that I am on corrosive projection. That is because without pillage, it is a nice solid damage increase that's going to affect really everything that you're probably going to be doing. So I have liked that quite a bit. I will note this is an insanely suboptimal spot because unlike most things where this is actually really, really good to kind of all at once just like have enemies only be able to come from that direction, this is not so good for Octavia because she just wants as many enemies filtering in from as close as possible as you can like reasonably get to. Of course, this is still going to like, you know, kill quite a number of enemies, and we're, you know, almost at that like 100 kpm that we do want to be at just with this. But in an ideal circumstance, we would instead want to be in more of a room like this, actually. This is actually pretty good outside of the positioning of this needing to be a little different. And re-up our invisibility here, throw down R4. And then we just need to have R1 basically in a spot where it's going to be seen by enemies as they come from pretty much whatever direction. This can be a little tricky in this tile set because, like, you know, you'll want to have it be, like, you know, not behind a pillar and such like that. Usually it's not going to matter too much, as it's usually going to be kicking out like that 10,000 damage. Of course, keep in mind that most of the enemies that we're going to be interacting with are going to have that max armor. So it is actually doing 10 times that amount of damage. Especially if you do have, you know, something happening where there is not going to be armor on any of the enemies in the mission, like the Corpus and such like that. It will make very, very short work of them. I do wonder if this tile set, this is one I've not actually had the opportunity to try yet. I do wonder if this position might be fairly advantageous for what we'd want to be up to. It's definitely very nice for this up here. Oh, this lets me bring up a nice thing. This Xmas here, you can see that like just kind of feeding damage into my orb. The XMI will often be the enemies that can like get close to your one. And because of that, they actually can walk up and kind of dump a ton of damage into your one, which lets you kill everybody much, much faster. This is especially effective with Arctic Xmas because their shield will block your one. Meaning they can just like stand next to it and dump damage into it and make sure every other enemy that is spawning in basically is just constantly exploding to death, which works out really, really well. This is another thing where like this is like a solo strategy works incredibly well. We're almost 3 minutes for like 400 kills and such. And obviously, as you can tell, this playstyle does not need me in a large part for it. It is a kind of like set it up and it does the thing. This does mean that some of the stuff that this is very, very good at is, oh, hey, I need to just be able to dump damage on enemies and get buffed and all that good business, or I can be doing a mission objective. So if you're in a position, like say you're doing the Parita Rebellion, for example, you can be tossing out the infinite energy, which your team will certainly appreciate, throwing out your one to make sure that enemies are dying when they need to be dying, and just doing the objective, whether that is like mixing the chemicals, disarming the mines, doing all kinds of things like that. Octavia is really, really solid whenever there are sub-objectives on the menu. Also, like just this, where it's like, oh, I need to go collect all this stuff. Over here, these enemies are still just walking in here and dying. Obviously, I do 100% understand why people be like, well, that's not the most exciting, not the most exciting, perhaps, gameplay for, you know, a Warframe to be partaking in. But it is, you know, it is to taste. It is a thing where it's like, you know, if you love a tower defense, for example, it's kind of similar to that. It is like kind of in that vein of thing where it's like I have set up the perfect murder machine, and now the enemies will waltz into the grinder I have produced for them. One thing that is unfortunate, Jade Light Xmas won't use their beam on the orb. Funny thing that you can do is if your 3 is going to run out and there is a Jade Xmas, if you want to get frisky with it, you can drop out of your 3, stand on the orb, let them cast their laser, and then go back invisible. It'll detach from you and stay where it is. So you can get some like quirky, funny setups that way of getting a really massive amount of damage into your orb quite easily that way. Not really super like viable or something I would suggest you try and go for, but definitely very funny to do in practice. That has been an enjoyable one to try and get going a couple of different times. Okay, we're just about at that 5-minute mark, and we'll find out in a moment. Marksman, go away. Thank you. We're at 746 kills, just about that 150 KPM, which is really good. Another thing that we're about to see here, about to see this just immediately come to fruition, is, hey, it's violence. You know what violence can't turn off? You guessed it, it's Mallet. We can have our 3 turned off, so we will become visible, but Mallet actually does not get turned off by violence. So violence will like just die from this. We can just like hop out and just be, you know, in our operator mode, and violence really can't do much about it other than just like, you know, stare at the orb and just be present, which is a pretty funny one. So that is a quite an enjoyable thing, is that most of the time, you know, you have a pretty big problem with violence being around. But if you don't like want to shoot him and you just like, you know, want to make him look a fool, as many of us are wont to do in vengeance for violence turning off our very vulnerable squishy frames and making us have a bad time, then that is a thing that you get to do because of Octavia privilege. Because Octavia kind of, you know, Octavia has a long-running history of kind of just getting to do whatever she wants to do, and that most certainly is not going to stop anytime soon, as, of course, like, you know, me just, like, goofing around and just doing whatever, what have you. I'm at almost the 1,000 kills we normally end at, and we're not even at 7 minutes. So that is, like, it's a pretty big consideration for these things just work. Granted, you should remember that I did call out a couple of particular things that can come up as issues for Octavia earlier in this video, and that is, of course, that your 1 does not currently really like to cooperate with their being teammates, though if your teammates are not, you know, very effective, very active Warframes that are going to be just, you know, burning it down really at any given method, where if it's, you know, Sevagoth map clearing, or any such real combination of just like powerful clear Warframe, the Korra, Gara, you know, the exalted Warframes that can really just nuke everything, Atlas, those all really apply here. If you don't have those types of Warframes with you, you can usually have a very good time and like get a lot of stuff done. Of course, other things that are worth noting, Octavia is a frame that you could theoretically bring to like Cascade and stuff, as the damage does scale quite well. Because the more damage the enemies do, you want to make sure you don't stand right in the way of Xmas explosions. Though, of course, we do have a shield gate and can refresh that. But you want to make sure that you're not standing quite in the way, as it will just be unnecessary. Other thing we do have to make sure of is that we, instead of just like, you know, talking theory and funny situations and ha-has and just, you know, telling ghost stories around the Mallet campfire, you do want to make sure you go pick up your loot every once in a while and just make sure that's all on the level. It's a thing that's probably relatively important to accomplish on Octavia. Because we just have, like, you know, copious amounts of loot around every corner just hanging about. I think I've actually missed quite a bit of life support and things from it despawning due to not being active enough and going and collecting everything. That is part of what I was actually mentioning earlier, which is sometimes you just have way more range than you need. This is the case where you can just drop overextended in favor of kind of whatever else you really want to make room for. Maybe that's like, you know, some people do like rolling guard for like real emergencies or real weirdness. Because, you know, we are just invisible. That's not invincibility like you might want to have. And Rolling Guard can kind of provide that in emergency situations, which is always convenient. Yeah, that kind of stuff is all well and good. But yeah, we're at, like, you know, 1250 here. I think we're probably not going to quite hit that 150, but like I said, it's gone from like about like the 100, 110 range to about like usually I'm seeing like 130. 130 to 150, not always like right on the like 150 type area, and this is like pretty much right in line with like that 130 area, a little bit on like the lower end. But of course I am just like, you know, yapping to the nines and not shooting enemies or really doing much to help myself out here. So just imagine if you were, you know, doing anything about it and how many kills you could get then. And that's kind of like one of the big things here, is that this playstyle is not going to be for everyone. There's a lot of people who very reasonably don't like this. And I think that shows pretty well in Octavia's overall play rate. We're just about at that 1400. Got about 20 seconds left to see what we can do. Of course, in terms of like the raw damage, kaboom, there you go. That enemy's immune to status naturally. Throw our 1 back out, see if we can finish this off and get to that nice crispy 1500 with minimal effort, let's say. Got 5 seconds, 60 kills. Now, probably not going to happen, but, you know, we're right within that targeted range. Trying out this tile is another one where that's, like, quite easy. But, yeah, any mission where, like, the enemies are going to be more dangerous and more effective, this is pretty much just going to scale right to whatever that is. Like, if the enemies do more damage, that means your one does more damage. And because enemy tankiness is generally not really, like, along those same lines, where we're going to have... oh, hey, we have a... Right, of course. The other Acolyte, of course. He's a bit late to the party, isn't he? But we'll have him. He's fine to just show up. We'll just, like, bump this out here. This isn't violence, but it is... Oh, this is gives me a good opportunity to note. Acolytes, when they spawn in, they know where you are. Just like, kind of a thing that they have. If you don't re-up invisibility, they'll always know where you are. That's actually a weird quirk of them. That's probably a long-term bug. But that is just a thing that they have. That's why if you are Ivara, for example, funny thing is you should turn your 3 off and then turn it back on in order to make it so they no longer know where you are. So that's a funny, quirky one for you, for those that don't know that little tidbit about how Acolyte AI works. But yeah, they have perfect information about your current status. You are effectively not invisible whenever they first... If you are invisible when they spawn in, then they don't recognize you as invisible, basically, is the TLDR, until you go back invisible. So if my invisibility had ended, then I would be considered invisible and they wouldn't shoot at me. Which is weird. But, you know. It's a feature. Or it's something, the apex predator, the perfect hunter, the acolytes, right? Something along those lines for sure. Can I... No, we're just... Okay. Waypoints have been very helpful. Yeah, this way. Okay. Yeah. Game was not a big fan of showing me the green waypoint. It is way out here. Sometimes you got to use the big map to get out of these places, apparently. But yeah, pretty simple stuff here. I mean, like... We are over 1,500 kills right now. I mean, I'm going to be at 100 KPM even if I was messing around here for the next couple of minutes. But yeah, pretty easy stuff for Octavia. And, you know, she's real good. She has gotten a little worse over time as invisibility has kind of gotten worse. But all the things that she has done well, she has continued to do well for a very long time. But yeah, that's going to do it. That's Octavia. I will see you tomorrow. All right, a new year is here, and we actually have some new patrons to thank. Thank you very, very much all for supporting the channel, especially the $10 patrons, Athean, Eighth, Alex Parnham, Arbiter Daydream, Baby Hoot, Barkus, Canuvan, Blotomatic, Brutus Salazar, Cano Lathra, Clob World 3, Dylan Dworsky, Ithrain, James Harsthorn, JC4 Science, Josh, Nightcar 1981, Lord Ian, Luzanth, Matt Holt, Mike Kiesman, Mikkel, Michta, Nerve, One Man Wolfpack, Ruby, S267, Sanyu, Season, Sharp247, Snap the Mag, The Coupon of Death, Waifu Wars, Wodet01, Seraphir, and Zero Weaves Plan. Thank you all very much. And of course, thank you to all of my $5 and $2 patrons as well. Your support is much appreciated. We should be getting a ton of new build stuff out because there is a lot of new things that came out in December and many things to test and figure out.